So what vegetables can you sow in your vegetable garden in the month of July? Well, July is a month where you've probably already got a lot of vegetables growing all around your garden. Because of the warmer temperatures and the longer days, the vegetables will thrive in these conditions. As healthy as your vegetables may be developing, there's still a great opportunity to continue sowing seeds to prolong that growing season. And in this video, I'm going to make 6 suggestions for vegetables that you might think about sowing in July in order to fill some of those gaps when you start to harvest your vegetables and also prolong the growing season. Now, there's still quite a range of vegetables that you can still sow in the month of July, but in this video, I'm going to suggest 6 of my favourite vegetables that I'll be sowing in July just to give you 1 or 2 ideas. Stay tuned to the end of the video because the final vegetable that I'm going to recommend might be a bit of a surprise to you. It's worth mentioning that I'm in growing zone number 8, which is right in the centre of the UK. So if you are in a different part of the world or a different growing zone, you may need to adjust sowing and planting dates based upon your local conditions. Now, my first recommendation for vegetable seeds to sow in July is green beans, and they're such a fantastic vegetable to grow, so versatile and relatively easy to grow. As you can see to the side of me here, I've already started growing some green beans at the end of May, and I'll continue to add further sowings as we go through July. Now, the great thing about green beans is firstly there's loads of varieties to choose from. You might decide to grow varieties of dwarf green beans that grow to around about 1.5 feet high, and this is a variety called Ferrari of dwarf green beans that I'll also be making further sowings of. But you can also get varieties of climbing French beans, and they're fantastic if you've got limited space, and therefore you'll grow vertically and they don't take up a huge amount of space in your vegetable beds. Green beans are also fantastic for filling spaces where you've just harvested your vegetables. And I've said this in previous videos, an empty space is a wasted space. So if you do have spaces in your vegetable garden where you've harvested certain vegetables, then why not plant some green beans straight into the ground in their place? Other varieties include varieties like Tender Crop, which I've also grown before as a dwarf green bean, and they're absolutely fantastic. And climbing French beans such as Blue Lake are another example of ones that you might like to try if you've never grown them before. Now, when sowing green beans, just make sure that you've got nice, good, fertile soil to put them into, or maybe compost. The seeds are very easy to handle because you can pick them up because of their size, and you can place them into positions that you want them. Green beans will be planted at a depth of around about 2.5 centimetres or 1 inch deep. And if you are planting them directly into their final positions, they need to be about 20 centimetres apart or 8 inches to give them plenty of growing space. Now, a little tip for sowing beans is sow 2 seeds together rather than individually, and that means if one doesn't germinate, you've got a backup one in its position. Of course, if you do have gaps, you can move them and transplant them, but it just saves that step if you plant them together. If both of them germinate, they should be perfectly okay together, but you can separate them, and that's something I generally do when I'm sowing beans. Now, in July, you should really sow these directly into the ground. Ideally, they like temperatures of 15 to 20 degrees centigrade to germinate, and in July, it's highly likely that your soil will be at that temperature. When you do plant your bean seeds, it might be worth thinking about providing a little bit of protection just until they establish to a certain size. And the reason for that is when they germinate, birds and other insects will be attracted to them, and it might be worth giving them that little bit of protection until they establish to a decent size. Now, there's nothing quite like fresh herbs in the vegetable garden. July is an absolutely fantastic month for growing herbs. Now, as you can see here, I've got some sage here which I've taken from cuttings. There's 4 plants there which are growing really well, and there's some rosemary here which a week ago I took some cuttings from my rosemary plant, and I've got half a dozen of those. There will be a video coming out on my channel very soon and show you how I did the rosemary cuttings, and I will produce one for the sage. But what I really wanted to focus on for this video was basil. Basil seeds are great to sow in July. They thrive in really warm, hot, sunny conditions. And it's such a wonderful, versatile herb. Just in front of me here, you can see a few pots of basil that I sowed from seed at the beginning of May, and they're doing really well. Already, the smell of them is absolutely amazing. And this is such a great herb for tomato dishes. You can put them in pastas, you could use them in pizzas, Italian dishes. It really is quite a versatile herb. Now, these particular ones here need to grow a little bit further before I start to use them. But the great thing about basil, once they get to a certain size, you can start to cut some of the perimeter leaves off and the plant will still grow and produce more leaves. But I will be planting some more of these at the beginning of July. Now, they can be sown directly outside. If you have some fine compost or soil, there's no reason why you can't sow these directly outside. Or you could start them in cell trays indoors, wait for them to get to around about 2 to 3 inches in height, and then transplant them into their final positions. You'll notice that basil seeds are really small and really fine, so they need to be sown quite thinly, but also they need to be sown very, very shallow. So if you are sowing them directly outside, prepare the compost, give it a good water before you start to sow the seeds, sprinkle the seeds between your forefinger and thumb, and then just give it a very thin coating of compost, very thin layer, and then water again. Now, if you're not going to grow them in pots or containers like I do, and you're going to plant them directly outside, they need to be at a distance of around about 30 centimetres or 12 inches apart. But basil's a really fabulous herb to sow in the month of July. Now, another vegetable that regularly appears in vegetable growing videos, and rightly so, is radish. Radish is probably the fastest growing vegetable and arguably one of the easiest vegetables to grow, so it really is popular in the vegetable garden. July is a fantastic month to continue sowing radish seeds. Now, you can get some varieties of radish that will allow you to harvest around about 40 days after you've planted the seeds. And radish are one of those vegetables that you do want to pick as quickly as possible because they can get quite woody if you leave them in the ground too long. But their peppery flavour makes them so popular on salads and in other recipes. The continuous supply all through the year is well worth having. And one of my favourite varieties is a variety called French Breakfast 3, which I've grown for many years, and that's always produced really nice radishes. In the past I've grown a variety called Scarlet Globe, and this variety here, Sparkler 3, I grew for the first time last year, and they were really nice as well. There are many other varieties available that give a really wide range of choice. Now, like most seeds in July, these should be sown directly outside in well prepared soil or compost. And just like I've mentioned previously for the basil seeds, it's always best to water the ground before you sow these seeds. So prepare your compost, water the ground, and then place your seeds. Radish need to be sown to a depth of around about 1.5 centimetres or an inch. They should germinate in 7 to 14 days. You do plant your radish seeds really close together, you feel like you want to thin them out, and you can do that when they get to about an inch in height. However, I never thin them out. I'll always sow them and just leave them, and it might result in slightly smaller radishes if you grow them too close together, but they're equally as nice. The radish is another great seed to sow in July. Now, there's always a certain point in the year as a vegetable grower where my thoughts start to turn towards winter vegetables, i.e. what vegetables do I need to sow so that I can get a harvest through autumn and into winter. And that generally will be things like spinach, Chinese cabbage, mitsuma, and certain varieties of lettuce. However, I'm likely to sow those seeds round about August onwards. However, there is one veg that can also be classed as a winter veg that I will sow in July, and that's Swiss chard. Now, the beauty of Swiss chard is it doesn't mind warm temperatures, but also it's quite frost tolerant as well. So whereas you would start to be concerned about sowing certain vegetables and the possibility of them being caught by frost, that isn't so much of an issue with Swiss chard. Now, Swiss chard does require well-drained soil, and it will require regular watering. Again, it's another quite versatile vegetable for salads, stir-fries, and many other uses in cooking. So it is a really handy vegetable to have in your garden, which will give you a harvest beyond the normal growing season for most other vegetables. This is a variety I'll be growing for the first time actually. It's called White Silver 2. And these seeds will be sown to a depth of 1.5 centimetres or 1 inch, and to a distance of around about 40 centimetres, which is around about 16 inches, so you do give them a fair bit of space. If you've never tried Swiss chard before, it's well worth giving this vegetable a go, and July is a really good time to sow some seeds. And something else I'll be sowing in July, and probably my last sowings of this vegetable for this season, is going to be carrots. In front of me here I have 3 rows of carrots that I sowed around about 5 weeks ago, and they're doing really well. But it's always good to have a regular supply of carrots, and July is a really good month to get your final sowings in. Now, this is a really popular variety of carrots called Autumn King 2, and it always produces a really good crop. A raised bed actually is a perfect place to grow carrots. Because of the height of the raised bed on the perimeter, it does limit the possibility of carrot root fly. But you can plant them directly in traditional beds, as long as you do make some provision for protection for carrot root fly. Some people put a perimeter around them and measures like that. Now, the carrots do need to be regularly watered. They do like fertile soil, like most vegetables actually, but they will thrive if you keep them well watered. Carrots are one of those vegetables that you'll either sow directly into traditional or raised beds, or you can grow them in containers if you've got the right depth of containers and the right type of soil or compost. And like some of the other vegetables I've already mentioned in the video, the right way to sow these type of seeds is to prepare the ground or the compost to water first and then to sow your seeds. These will be at a depth of 1.5 centimetres with a light covering of compost and then well watered. Now, one thing I really like about carrots is that you don't really need to do an awful lot with them once they've been sown. There is some debate about whether they should be lifted and separated if they're too close, but I never tend to do that. I'll sow them, water them and leave them, and if they are too close together you might get slightly smaller carrots. They always taste really great anyway. So carrots are another variety of vegetables that are great to sow in the early part of July, just to give you that continuous harvest. Now, this is a surprise vegetable that I was talking about right at the beginning of the video, and that is cucumber. Many people think that sowing cucumbers in July is too late, and there's a number of reasons for that. The first thing, particularly in the UK, we tend to sow cucumbers quite early when the temperature is cool, and they're very slow starters. But when we get to the months of late May, June and July and the temperature is a lot warmer, cucumbers will grow really quickly. So there's absolutely no reason why you can't sow cucumber seeds directly into the ground, or like I do in containers, in the month of July. Now they'll always grow best in full sunshine, and they do like plenty of water. They are quite temperamental as a vegetable compared to other vegetables in terms of the way we need to monitor and care for them. For example, the leaves can dry out really quickly, and that's usually down to lack of water. Now there are two types of cucumbers you could grow: indoor cucumbers, which you'll grow in a polytunnel or a greenhouse, or outdoor cucumbers like I do, which are referred to as ridge cucumbers, and they'll grow particularly well outside. And the difference is that usually the outdoor cucumbers are a little bit smaller and have a very slightly prickly outer skin which you just rub off once they're harvested. Now I haven't got a greenhouse or a polytunnel, so I have no choice but to grow outdoor cucumbers, but this variety here I've grown anyway for years. It's a variety called Market More 76, and every single year I've had plenty of success with this, and it does produce a really good crop of cucumbers. Now this one you can see here in the container is one of 5 that I started growing much earlier in the year. I planted the seeds in March, and as I mentioned, because the temperatures in the UK in March and April are quite low, these have been very slow to grow. But over the last few weeks we've had lots of sunshine and really warm temperatures, and they're really coming on now, and they look really healthy as well. Now, like I mentioned with beans, as a safety net, I'll always sow 2 seeds together for the cucumbers, and if one doesn't germinate, it just gives me a bit of a backup. So that might be worth doing if you've got plenty of seeds. Definitely give cucumbers a try, particularly this variety, Market More 76, if you've not grown them before. Now you could grow indoor varieties of cucumbers, and they will have the protection of the indoor environment, whether that's a greenhouse or a polytunnel, etc. The disadvantages of that is in very, very warm temperatures, you might need to provide some form of screening or shading to prevent the cucumbers from being scorched, or make sure that they've got plenty of water. But it's like any vegetable, they'll always take a certain amount of care, but I do find cucumbers to be one of the most temperamental of all vegetables, and you have to monitor these more closely than a lot of other vegetables. So cucumbers are my final suggestion for this video for seeds that you can sow in July. Now I've provided 6 suggestions of vegetables that you might think about growing in July, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there's plenty of other vegetables that you could sow in the month of July. In fact, I did a video last year with some further suggestions of vegetables to sow in July, and I'll put a link to that video in the video description below to give you some more choices. But I really hope you enjoyed the suggestions and the varieties that I've suggested, and it'd be really great to know what vegetables you're sowing in July, and maybe suggest 1 or 2 varieties that you might recommend that I grow myself. So if you have got any suggestions, then pop a comment below the video for myself and others to take a look at. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, vegetables and flowers, and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.